The Flatfoots of Flat Rock. Written and narrated by Creepypasta. There is a memory I recall when the winds begin to shift, when the pleasant warm air of a North Queensland autumn teases its retreat, making way for the bitter sting of winter. It comes on hard, heavy and relentless. Whenever I feel that crisp air making its way across the land, I am taken right back there. Let me take you back there now. Back to 1999. How far is it now? I ask, seated in the passenger side of my brother's '89 model Ford Laser, a vehicle which had absolutely no business travelling this far out bush. I'm not quite sure. It's been a while since I was last out this way. We're looking for a very specific tree here. You'll know it when you see it. An old Y-shaped ghost gum, just off the left of the road. That marks the turnoff to Flat Rock. I saved my game and shut off my Game Boy Color before the batteries went dead on me, and I had to restart from who knows how far back. Winding the window down, I took a deep breath in, getting a nice whiff of mid-July air. It was a cold day, and a few rain clouds hung overhead. That was a rare treat in these parts. Usually, the summer months are our wet season, winter generally being cold and dry. I stuck my little head out the window, scanning the side of the road. With an audible sigh, I turned to my brother. There's no trees like that anywhere. Are you sure we're on the right? Before I could finish my sentence, Matt slammed on the brakes, pointing excitedly ahead. There it is, he shouted, as my eyes fell upon the ancient-looking ghost gum tree up ahead. Its form split in two, branching out into a distinctive Y shape. I pulled my head back inside the car and wound the window up as the tires crunched onto the dirt road and a wave of dust kicked up. And so it began, another weekend outback camping trip. These little excursions make up much of the highlight reels of my youth. Nights spent camping out under the stars, swimming in the many waterholes and rivers that surrounded our hometown, cooking homely meals over a fire, and of course, staying up late, telling scary stories. Being winter, we wouldn't be doing much swimming on our trip, of course. The water reached almost sub-zero temperatures during these cold months, so unless you wanted an express trip to the hospital with hypothermia, that wasn't a great idea. After driving a little ways down this dirt road, we crested a hill, and I caught my first sight of Flat Rock. I was not blown away by it, to be honest, and in fact, kind of weirded out upon first sight. I had been to many of these spots and I'd seen all kinds of varying landscapes, but this one, it was like nothing I'd ever seen before. It was different, almost alien in its appearance. I can't even really sit here today and explain to you why it felt that way. It's just one of those things. When you break it down, everything seems normal. But the colors, the shapes, the layout, everything together seemed to formulate an image that simply did not compute inside the human mind. I recall noting how strangely pale the rocks were in this part of the river, compared to other stretches I'd camped at. As we got closer though, these odd feelings seemed to slip away as I got to see the place up close. We drove on down, near to the water's edge, coming to a stop about 10 meters back from the riverbank. Excited for another fun weekend out in the bush, I sprung out of the car and started unpacking our things. Our swags first. then the cooking supplies, and little Billy for tea, our bag of firewood, and finally the tent. We normally didn't use the tent, happy enough to just camp out rough in our swags. But with those rain clouds hanging just overhead and threatening to open up at any minute, we thought it might be a good idea if we prop it up this time. I made a start on that right away. At just 10 years old, I was a pretty capable outdoorsman, or so I thought. Matt watched on as I scurried around tapping in tent pegs and hilariously jumping from side to side, trying to catch stray bits of tent before the whole thing got carried away in the wind. He gave a chuckle before jumping in and helping me to finish the job. We got a bit of a fire going under a makeshift shelter, and we rugged up inside the tent, just in time to kick back and watch the first trickles of rain start coming down. There we sat, looking out over the river as tiny droplets fell into the water, sending out little ripple effects all converging into each other to form utterly mesmerizing patterns. We cracked out the beers, ginger for me, 4x gold for my bro, and we just existed. It was out here that the both of us felt most at peace. We could let it all go and just live in those moments. We passed silly jokes back and forth, commiserated over our parents' divorce, talked about our futures, talked about the state of the world, the state of the universe. Hell, we could have solved the grand unified theory and not even noticed it for how random and deep those conversations got. As the sun began to signal its descent beneath the mountains on the distant horizon, and the freezing temperatures typical of an outback Australian winter began creeping their way across our campsite, we pulled out the blankets and started getting cozy for the night. Of course, this is the part of these trips that the scary stories would begin. I both loved and hated this little routine. I've always enjoyed the feeling of being scared, or perhaps the thought of it, the idea of it. But actually being scared in that moment, that part was hell. I've spent many sleepless nights on those weekend excursions, too scared to sleep for the rustle of a nearby bush or what seemed to be footsteps around the campsite. Of course, it never was, but that did nothing to comfort my imaginative little brain. I did my best for my part, attempting to scare my brother senseless with a tired old urban legend that kids had been repeating for decades. He acted scared, but I could tell he was putting it on. As my story trailed off to an entirely unremarkable finale, a distant clap of thunder seemed to foreshadow what I knew was coming next. My brother reached over to the nearby bag of firewood, hurling another log onto the campfire, ensuring maximum immersion, I suppose. He then turned and stared at me, his face turning stone cold serious. Now look, before we put out the fire and go to sleep tonight, I need to tell you about something out here. Something that's actually real. I shifted a bit where I sat, rolling my eyes in anticipation of the coming supposedly true story, trying to mask the fact that I was actually nervous. I hated when these stories were true. If he was telling me about ghosts or monsters, I could somewhat pass it off as nothing to be scared of. But when you're being told about something that's supposedly real, that's a whole other ballgame. You heard the local legends about the big cats. I said nothing, merely looking back at him with a curious look. He continued, "No, really. Back during the gold rush days, there were small colonies all over this land. People came from all over the world to carve out their chunk of the riches." I stared a little more intently now. That part was indeed true. This place was once the most populated city in the country, back when there were fortunes to be made here. I still wasn't convinced though. "What's that got to do with big cats?" I asked, trying to sound tough. And the story continued on. Well, you see, when the Americans came over, a lot of them brought things with them. You've seen the cane toads hopping around, yeah? They were introduced to keep pests from attacking crop fields. Same deal with the big cats. When you're out here mining for gold, you don't want anyone coming near your property. You know, where you might be storing said gold. So, they brought protections with them. Most of them, dogs and guns. But some of the crazy bastards brought other animals. Bobcats, mountain lions, pumas even. Brought them over as cubs, introduced them into the acreage surrounding their farms and whatnot. But they're well grown up now. So are their kittens, and their kittens' kittens. To this day, many of them still roam this land, sustaining themselves on whatever they can find. That includes little boys and girls. "Shut up!" I shouted at my brother. Yeah, I know. I talk a big game. I love being scared and all that. But that part really got me. The idea that we could be surrounded right now by actual, living monsters closing in on us. That genuinely frightened the crap out of me. My brother laughed and roughed my hair. "Time for sleep, kid," he said, before adding, "Don't let the mountain lions bite." He gave me a wink before stepping out to douse the fire. I flicked on my portable nightlight, feeling quite grateful in that moment that I had remembered to put fresh batteries in it, and I resigned myself to read my Garfield comics for a while before sleep, trying to calm my now super anxious mind. Thankfully, with the soft trickle of the rain on the tent and the familiar sarcastic antics of my feline friend Garfield, my eyes were unwillingly closing in no time. A few violent cracks of thunder, accompanied by blinding flashes of lightning, woke me up at what must have been, I suppose, just past midnight. I had never been frightened by storms, but this one, picking up in severity, and our only cover from it being a 4-man tent, I must admit, that got my heart pumping. By the looks of things, this one was damn close too. I fiddled around in the darkness, looking for my nightlight. I just wanted to not be alone, and to not be in the dark. I was a little kid. I was scared, and I wanted to see that my brother was still there with me. If I could just see that, I could calm down, maybe get back to sleep. I fumbled around, feeling all around my roll-out bed. As I inched my way up the left side wall, my hand finally fell upon something solid, and I grabbed for it. My hand grasped around something, but it certainly didn't feel like my nightlight. As I gripped harder and tried to lift it up to my face to get a good look at what it was, this object did not move. Weird, I thought, before fumbling around again in my search. Finally, my hands found the nightlight, and I flicked it on, illuminating the dark tent. I glanced back down to where my hands had previously been. Nothing was there. But something had been. I had definitely felt something in my hand. I was almost prepared to pass it off as my imagination when I heard a soft groan from outside, right behind me, just outside the tent. I froze in place, reality beginning to slowly click together in my head. Very carefully, I repositioned the nightlight to shine down to the spot where I'd been certain I felt something. A trail. A noticeable indentation in the sand between the wall of the tent and its foundation. Such a mundane sight in any other possible scenario, but in this moment right now, a sign of absolute horror. Something had been pressed into the sand in that spot moments ago, and something very deliberately dragged itself away from that spot. A foot. Yes, it must have been. A foot belonging to some kind of animal. Oh my God, it's true, I thought. The big cats. They were hunting us. I knew it. Tears welled up in my little eyes as I listened to the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Deliberate footsteps. Stalking around our campsite. Not just one beast. No, multiple now. At least 4 or 5. I began to call my brother's name in a hushed whisper. "Matt," I squeaked out, trying desperately to keep my voice down, but wanting nothing less than to be alone right now. "Matt," I called again. This time, a sleepy grunt in response. "Matt, wake up. The big cats are out there." He slowly sat up, asking me what the hell I was talking about. "Shh. The big cats. They're in our camp." His eyes went wide now, as he too heard the footsteps and those groaning sounds. He leapt across the tent, grabbing me and wrapping a hand around my mouth. I was struggling to get free, but he quickly turned me to face him, a finger pressed against his lips. "Shh, shh, shut up," he silently snapped at me. An audible silence, then more footsteps, walking around the campsite. Matt beckoned me to come close and whispered quietly yet sternly, "There's no big cats. I made that up." A cold wave of fear rushed over me as I realized the consequence of what he was saying. If this wasn't animals, what the hell was it? What the hell kind of foot had I touched? And what the hell was walking around outside? Another flash of lightning suddenly illuminated the scene outside, and a loud crack of thunder overhead startled us. But in that moment, something became clear. It was only for a split second, but we both noticed it, and it caused us to both huddle under the blankets and crawl back as far as we could to the other side of the tent. Whatever was outside, it was walking upright. We cowered there, using the blankets as some kind of mental force field, as something inhuman stalked around outside, emitting noises unlike anything we had ever heard. I heard the same low groans as before, but I also heard strange chirping noises, along with some sort of weird backwards gurgle. It turned my guts to hear it. There were definitely multiple of them, and at this point, it became apparent that they were moving away from the tent. Matt grabbed me then and spoke in a whisper, but very pointedly to me. "The keys are still in the car. Mate, if ever there was a time you need to trust me and follow me without question, it's now. I know you want safety, comfort and answers, but I don't know what those things are out there, or what they want, so I can't give you that right now. But I can do anything in my power to get you out of this situation, right?" I just nodded. Honestly, I think the shock was too much for me to process anything anyway. We slowly unzipped the tent, and I watched as Matt held 3 fingers in the air. He lowered one, then another, then the last, and we sprinted. We ran for that car, faster than I think either of us thought we could. As we ran, I heard a very, very strange sound, one that has never left my mind. It was simultaneously the most absurd sound and the most terrifying sound that I've ever heard. Gsh, flop, gsh, flop, gsh, flop. Over and over. Not at any kind of fast pace. No. In fact, I recall being quite surprised at the time, as I expected to hear rapid footfalls right on our tails. But we didn't. Just that flopping noise, over and over. We reached the car, and we quite literally threw ourselves into it. I frantically slammed down the door locks, while Matt struggled to get the key into the ignition. Finally, the key made it in, and he turned it over. Click, click, click. Nothing. He made multiple attempts, but the damn thing would not start. We silently looked at each other, defeated, and then slowly lifted our heads to the front windscreen as the same thing caught our peripheral visions. Gsh, flop, gsh, flop, gsh, flop. Slowly they approached, before coming to a standstill in a group before us. 6 of them. My tears fell freely now. What stood in the darkness ahead of us was disgusting. Tall, slender, pale things. One of them stepped closer, approaching Matt's side of the car. It just walked into the car, like a mindless drone of some sort, walking 2 steps forward, smacking against the driver's side door, before stepping back again, and over it went. After a few repetitions of this, it raised a hand and began trailing its fingers slowly up and down the glass. My tears flowed freely now, as another of these things approached my side of the car and did the same, sliding its hand up and down the door, occasionally lowering its head to look through at me, making those weird chirping, gurgling noises. I covered my ears, not wanting to hear the sounds. My eyes stayed locked ahead on the rest of them. I could not stop fixating on what I had touched earlier in the night. Those feet. Those disgusting, flat feet. Elongated. Like a duck, but without the webbing. And bigger. Pale too. Much like the rest of them. And those eyes. Have you ever stared at an owl? It's creepy, right? You can only look for so long before you get the strangest feeling come over you. Like you're being watched by something that is entirely wrong. Suddenly, from elsewhere in the darkness, an almighty cry echoed through the night, and each one of those things snapped their necks around to look at where that sound had come from. The 2 at our sides, they lowered their heads slowly, glaring through the windows at us. Those owl-like eyes piercing through us. They stared long and hard for about 10 seconds before they walked back to the rest of the group and began walking away towards where that sound had come from. Gsh, flop, gsh, flop, gsh, flop. My brother tried the car again, to no avail. The engine just continued helplessly clicking, to no desirable outcome whatsoever. Gsh, flop, gsh, flop, gsh, flop. I remember crying very loudly now, confused, not knowing if they were really leaving or if they were going to come charging back to get us. My tiny little child brain had no idea what to think. I recall my brother's hand gripping my shoulder, followed by a giant flash of light and the most earth-shattering thunderclap I've ever heard, or probably will ever hear. And then, the land was silent once again. No cries, no rain, no storm. Everything was calm. They were gone. Those awful things were gone. I looked up at my brother to see that he too had a look of absolute sheer horror on his face, and his eyes were far from dry. That is the last time I ever remember seeing my brother shed tears. Shaking, his hand struggled to grasp the keys once again, and he turned the engine over. It roared to life, which may still to this day be the most amazing sound I have ever heard. We did not waste time. We didn't grab the rest of our gear. To hell with that. No, we just floored it. We floored it back down that dirt road, floored it past that ancient ghost gum, and floored it all the way back down the highway into town. I suppose that this might be the part of the story where you expect some neat little summary, some explanation of what I saw that night. Well, I would imagine you may have gathered that I cannot give you that. In fact, this is actually the first time I've felt confident enough to revisit that memory. The memory of that terrible night. One day, I may look deeper into it, search a little more extensively for answers. But for now, you know as much as I do. I don't know if what we encountered was some ancient beast or spirit or an alien species from another planet. All I can tell you is that I saw something not of this world that night. Something my brother and I came to refer to as the Flatfoots. Among all the mysteries of that night, however, the most troubling unanswered question this whole experience left me with is simply the knowledge that these things actually exist. As a young child, I could pass off scary stories as nothing to truly be afraid of. But having come face to face with true horror, you come to question what else might be lurking. What other unearthly beings could be hiding in plain sight, concealed within the trees, or in the storm clouds, underneath the waters, or much closer to home? How many of these things actually exist and are just waiting for darkness to fall?